Story 1. I was driving home through back roads I had never been on and came across a bookstore in a tiny town in the woods. The bookstore was actually a house where the front of the home had been converted into a store. A box on the porch said, 50 books. So I stopped to see if there were any Stephen King books in there. A middle-aged woman comes out with a huge smile and gives me a bowl of fruit and some tea. I'm like, this place is awesome, and rifle through books while eating the fruit and downing the tea. Inside the store home, there were a lot of cool art books and stuff, so I spent some more time there. She brought me more tea. Even when I said, no thank you, that's plenty, she kept refilling. Gave me dessert too, brownies and cookies. I didn't realize it at the time, but she was drugging me. It's hazy to remember the details, but at some point she closed the shop, telling me to take my time looking at the books. She told me that she was going to go take a shower and was gone for a while. When I was ready to pay, I had to wander back through her house to find her. I found her in her bedroom. She was in bed. I'm pretty sure she was naked. At the time, I thought, weird, she's watching an exercise video in bed, but later realized she was watching porn. You might think this is hot, but it isn't. She was my mom's age and had been telling me how she reminded me of her kids in college. So it's not hot. I told her I was ready to pay, and she told me how to open the register, so I went and opened it, put in what I thought I owed, took out the change, and left. When I stumbled outside, a fire engine drove by, screaming with sirens. In the distance was the glow of a big forest fire, and the stars were being covered by smoke. A tall man on a horse watched the fire truck pass. He looked right at me, took a piece of wood or something out of his mouth and said, "Town's burning." I swear to God I have a crystal clear memory of this happening, even though I'm sure it couldn't have. By this point, I guess I was seriously tripping balls on something. I'm not a drug guy, so I don't know what I had, but I was out of my mind and could hardly walk. I got back in my car and drove home along twisting roads on tall cliffs above the ocean. Twice I realized I was on the wrong side of the road. One of the times I realized this was when a massive truck was headed straight for me, laying on the horn and flashing its lights. I kept thinking about how my car could be like an airplane and a submarine if I drove it off the cliff. I can't believe I made it home alive. Later I realized I was in that house for about 4 hours looking at books. At least that's what I hoped to hell I was doing. Story 2. It was grade 11 and I had just moved to a new town. I quickly became attracted to this one girl and would have given my left nut for a date. We got paired up to be partners in our food and fabrics class, and I totally pulled out all the stops. I was doing whatever it took to get a date with this girl. In the class, there were a couple of projects where you would have to sew a pillowcase or a pair of pajamas, etc. My family didn't have a sewing machine, so we would do the projects at her house. Upon these visits, I began to question how badly I wanted this girl. She lived in what appeared to be a wood cabin, and her father seemed legitimately insane. The walls were lined with animal skulls. The guy was a hardcore hunter. He had bearskin rugs and antlers all over the place. He would always walk around with his shirt off, drinking a Budweiser, chewing tobacco, carrying a shotgun. He never spoke a word to me. By this time, I was starting to gain some friendships in the school, and one of the guys I met, Neil, noticed that I'd taken a liking to her. He then asked me if I'd heard about her parents. He then proceeded to tell me that her dad killed her mom and got away with it. Her body was found in the middle of town, pumped by a couple of rounds from a shotgun. He got off on the charges from lack of proof, and she had to live with him because he was her last living relative. At this point, I was like, what the fuck? The story made no sense, and I wasn't about to believe it. But it definitely kind of rattled me. But there was no way that I was going to bring it up to her. Anyways, a little time passes and I ask her out. I go to her place to grab her, and she's gorgeous. Her dad comments, "You know what'll happen to you if you touch her." And suddenly the story is the only thing I can think about. We went skating, then to a movie, but I was terrified the whole time. I just couldn't get the thought out of my head that her dad was going to kill me when we got back to her place. So after a subpar date, I start the long drive back to her place. We get to the end of her driveway, long driveway. She has an acreage and she gets me to park and turn off the lights. She wants a kiss. At this point, forgets her dad. I lean over and put some moves on. We stop and I turn the lights back on. There's blood in the snow at the end of the driveway. I wanted to say something but didn't want to sound like a coward. Her dad was a hunter, right? I'm sure there's a logical explanation. I put the car in drive and started the winding drive down her driveway. The trail of blood seems to be getting thicker, and I'm getting more freaked out. She still says nothing as she's fixing her hair in her mirror. I keep driving. More blood. I turn the last corner of her driveway and see my headlights shift from the trees to her father, standing in the middle of the driveway, covered in blood. Blood all around him. Huge fucking knife in hand, and what appeared to be a naked human body lying at his feet. I start hyperventilating. Suddenly I'm crying and don't know why. I piss my pants. Her dad takes me to the hospital. Turns out I have had mild asthma for my entire life and had a panic attack. The dad found a bear at the end of the driveway, shot it, drug it down the driveway, and skinned it, or at least the part I saw before we got back. Anyways, that was a little over 3 years ago, and I'm still with the girl. Her dad calls me a pussy all the time, except we've gone on hunting trips together, and I'm pretty sure he's a fan. Neil was a jealous ex. Her parents split up. Her mom's pretty awesome too. Story 3. One time I got a flat very late at night, so I pulled into a gas station. I tried putting air in my tire, but the valve broke off as I tried, causing the tire to completely deflate. I was standing outside my car talking to AAA when a large older black man approached me. He disregarded the fact that I was on the telephone and asked if I needed help. A little weirded out, I smiled politely and thanked him, but told him I had AAA and they would take care of me. He insisted that he would help me and gestured towards a silver car parked in the shadows, telling me he would drive me anywhere. I again thanked him and told him no. He then said he was there to buy a soda and did I wanted anything. At this point, I was fed up and a little scared, so I firmly told him he needed to go buy his soda, and I was going to get into my car now. He walked off, I locked myself in the car, and the dispatcher at AAA, who had been on the phone for the entire conversation, asked if I wanted her to call the police. I told her no, it was fine. I didn't want to come off as racist. God, I was an idiot. I've since learned the difference between racism and looking out for your personal well-being. Well, the woman from AAA said, you might not think you're in any danger, but I'm concerned, so I'm bumping you to the top of the list. We hung up, and I sat in the car bored. At this point, I noticed my new friend had come out of the store and was standing about 20 feet from my car staring at me. I thought this was very bizarre, and I started feeling a little nervous. I made sure my doors were safely locked. Over the next 20 minutes or so, I would take sidelong glances in his direction to see if he was still there. Eventually, he disappeared, and I heaved a sigh of relief. Then suddenly, I saw him again. He had stepped back inside the store and was crouched behind a window cling, staring directly at me. This was too much. Racism or not, I was fucking freaked out. I called 911. 911, what is your emergency? I explained the situation and that I was scared. Okay, I'll dispatch an officer to you immediately. Oh no, that won't be necessary. I don't want to waste anyone's time. Could you please just stay on the phone with me until the tow truck gets here? That way, if he approaches me again, I can show him I'm on the phone with the police. All right, sweetheart, can you tell me exactly where you are? Sure, I'm at the Hess on Colonial in Mercy Drive, it looks like. The dispatcher paused. Miss, I don't mean to alarm you, but I need to let you know you are currently stranded at one of the most dangerous intersections in the country. I'm dispatching an officer immediately. You need to promise that you won't exit your car for any reason, and do not hang up the phone until either a police officer or your tow truck is there. So I stayed on the phone, nervous, but not really thinking anything would happen. I would occasionally glance back at the store to see if Mr. Creeper was still there. Until, finally, he disappeared. I told the dispatcher, very relieved by this turn of events, when suddenly, the man somehow appeared in front of my car. He was walking right towards me, straight into my headlights. He reached down to adjust his pants when, bam! Yeah, that's right! He pulled his penis out. I burst into tears and started shouting into the phone what was happening. I averted my eyes to the steering wheel, not wanting to look at it. Now, since I was looking at my steering wheel, it came as quite a surprise when he appeared at my passenger door and tried to force his way in. Adrenaline is a funny thing. No longer was I a broken victim. I was pissed. I started screaming all sorts of obscenities at him. I told him I was on the phone with the fucking police. and they were going to put his ass in jail. I called him a bastard, a son of a bitch, a cunt. The poor 911 dispatcher must have thought I opened my door to scream at him, so she in turn was screaming at me to shut the door and wait for the cops. After maybe 3 minutes of screaming at him, he seemed to realize I wasn't responding favorably to his attempts at wooing the gentle lady that I am. He strolled towards some gas pumps about 10 feet away and stayed there. Several minutes after that, the tow truck rolls in. A gentleman got out of the truck and started heading my way. He noticed I wasn't getting out of my car to greet him, so he pointed at his hat, which proudly stated AAA. He got right up to my car door, and I shook my head violently, refusing to get out. I cracked the door open and his face changed. He saw that I had tears running down my cheeks and mascara smeared under my eyes. I explained quickly what had happened, nodding towards the man calmly standing by the gas pumps. He had put his dick away at this point. I saw the tow truck driver's face harden. "Did that motherfucker hit you?" He thought the smeared mascara was in fact a set of black eyes. I shook my head, no. "Lock your doors and tell the police to get their fucking asses here now. I'm going to make sure this shithead doesn't leave." I watched him walk over to Mr. Creeper and held my breath, expecting fists to be thrown. Instead, I saw what looked like a very cordial conversation. I found out after that he decided to pleasantly ask for directions to keep him here. Suddenly, we heard sirens. Mr. Creeper wildly looked in the direction of the sound, then directly at me, then glared at my knight in rusty armor. He realized he had been tricked. The police showed up, he was handcuffed, and I had to write the mother of all witness statements. They searched him, and it turns out he had a crack pipe on him, and that he was under the influence of cocaine. So yeah, that's my story. It wasn't pleasant, but I'm glad it happened to me, and I was able to get him arrested. I shudder to think what would have happened to some other poor girl if he had gone free that night. Story 4. A few years ago, me and some friends hiked up a creek until we found a suitable camping spot. We just pitched up on a sandbar we found with a nice fishing hole next to it. Later that day, we hiked up the creek a bit more and found an abandoned, partially built house. I pretty much just had the walls and roof up. There was a notice of permit violation on the door several years before. Everything inside looked like it had been undisturbed for years. There were a few cans of PBR that had expired 2 years prior. The only way in or out was a primitive Forest Service road. We walked up the road for about an hour trying to find where it connected to a main road, but couldn't find any evidence of civilization anywhere. So we headed back to the campsite. The next day we got completely obliterated and went back to the house. There was an old rusting car that was completely overgrown with brush. We had our fun destroying it, went through the abandoned house and kicked in the door to an old shed to explore it. It was a big drunken good time, and we weren't hurting anything as this place had clearly been abandoned and its natural deterioration was doing much more damage than we could hope to. The next day, me and one of the guys hiked a ways farther up the creek to find some better fishing. This would be a good time to point out that I'm almost always armed when camping until the booze starts flowing. So we were up the creek from the campsite with the old house between us and any hope of escape. After finding a spot to drop our lines and sharing the silence and peacefulness that you have on the last day of a camping trip, we heard it. Gunshots. Okay, no big deal. We're out in the middle of nowhere in NW, Washington. People shoot everywhere all the time, then a dog, close. So we get behind a tree and start staking out our path back. There was a big group of people at the house with a dog, and they were shooting rifles. They also appeared to be taking a close look at the busted-up car that we had gone to town on. They had driven in, so they obviously knew the house was there previously. These were some quite authentic rednecks, and there was literally no way to get help if something went down. We had hiked up the river for a couple of hours with no cell reception and no one in earshot to call out to. I had my pistol on me, and I'm one hell of a shot with it. But if these guys did want to fuck with us, it was my 8-round mag of .45S versus several of them with rifles. So we got on our hands and knees and slowly worked our way through some blackberry vines, trying not to make enough noise to alert their dog. At one point in the vines, the dog heard something and started barking in our direction. I saw a rifle pointed our way while the dog was barking, but the brambles were thick enough that they couldn't see us. We barely made it back to the campsite without being seen. We immediately started packing up to the sounds of the shooting and loudly yelling. It was pretty terrifying, and at several points I thought we were going to be seen and have to go toe-to-toe with a bunch of rednecks with guns asking why we were on their property and why their stuff was all fucked up. Lesson learned, no matter how abandoned something looks, just leave it the fuck alone. Story 5. It all started when my wife mentioned to me that her uncle is replacing his leach bed this weekend and felt strange about asking me to help him out. For you that don't know, a leach bed is a part of a septic system or a collection of all the shit you flush down the toilet. Now Ed, her uncle, is one hell of a nice guy. A guy that would do anything for, a friend, so I give him a call and tell him I'll be over on Saturday. Once there I discover that it will be Ed, Ernie the backhoe operator, Ed's 2 sons-in-law, and myself attempting this deed. I'm thinking, cool, we have a backhoe and a couple of extra guys to help with the labor. A cup of coffee and a donut later, we start digging. The lid to the septic tank was already uncovered, so the next thing to do is start digging along the side of it with the backhoe to find the existing pipe that leads to the septic system. The sound of a crack was the first sign that we found the plastic pipe that was followed by deadly vapors of past ass excrement close behind. So I, being the working type, hop down in the ditch boots covered in what can only be described as shit juices and dig around the pipe so that Ernie, the backhoe operator, can see what the fuck he is doing. Now we go to the exit hole in the septic tank and start a new trench to run lines to the leach bed. As my wife's Uncle Ed tells me, we have to make sure the outlet on the tank is clean and ready for the new pipe. This consists of not only standing in ass juice, but reaching my hand into the bowels of hell to scrap any remnants of shit off the side of the outlet on the septic tank. All the while, my face is inches away from ass juice, pure shit lumps, toilet paper, and tampons. I should mention at this time that Ed, the owner of this house, has 4 daughters and a wife. You would not believe the number of tampons that 5 women could produce. The outlet is clean with the new pipe and cement around it all. Hi boys, we are moving now. From here on out, this should be a breeze, and in no time I'll be drinking beer and eating steaks. So me and Scott, one of Ed's sons-in-law, are in the ditch putting pipes together, and all is going well. The ditch at this point is about 7 feet deep. The guys up top throw down some stones and a shovel for me to push the stones under a low point in the pipe. As I'm bent over, I hear a faint voice topside yell to get out of there. As the sounds are still entering my ears, I stand up, and at that same time, this 7-foot hole that I'm in collapses all around me. Still conscious and my head above ground, I can feel the weight of the dirt crushing my chest. I try to suck air into my lungs, but instead can only hear the bones in my chest begin to crack. Bang! Pop! Finally, I blacked out. This portion of the story is from what I heard from those that were there. My eyes bulged from my head as if they would pop from their sockets like zits from a teenager's face. Blood began to pour from my nose, mouth, and eyes. Everyone else was out of the ditch, but trying to pry the dirt off my near-dead body, snapping shovels in half like twigs. Ernie, the backhoe operator, moves the machine in closer to help. As he moves, more of the ditch starts to collapse. He puts down the outriggers to stop the machine from collapsing, then quickly inches the back towards my body. After about the 4th scope, he had released enough pressure off my chest to allow air to return to my lungs. Ag! I scream for every breath of air. Scott holds my arm, trying to pull me out of the ditch as they continue to dig. Once the dirt is down to my knees, I pop out of the hole bent over, but standing, I tell them, I'm okay. Blood still covering my face, Ed says, someone calls 911. You need to go to a hospital. I know, but I'm fucking alive. After the adrenaline wore off, I realized I was in so serious pain. It felt as if a car was parked on my chest. The ambulance arrived after what seemed like an hour and refused to give me shit for oxygen. A ride to the local hospital, followed by them trying to make me stand for x-rays and not giving me shit for the pain. The next thing I knew, the doctor must have seen the x-rays because he was asking if I wanted to be transferred to another hospital. For the record, when a doctor asks you if you want to be transferred, get the fuck out of there as soon as possible. Onto the helicopter I go, and they life flight my ass to AGH Pittsburgh, also the home of what I now consider real doctors. A doctor and a shot of morphine meet me on the tarmac. Things are finally looking up. As they tear my clothes off, I realize they are wiping shit from my ass. If that gives you an idea of how close I was to the end. A team of doctors and nurses hovered over me the entire time. Even as I pass through an open MRI, the team meets me on the other side. I spent a couple of days in intensive care on a whole lot of morphine. I remember waking up at one point and seeing the nurse preparing another needle of morphine. I said, "If you want me to get better, I can't take any more of that." She explained to me that if my lung collapsed again because I couldn't breathe, she would take the scalpel beside the bed and cut a hole into my chest to insert the plastic tube lying on the tray. I then graciously accept another shot of morphine and pass out again. I spend several more days in a standard room and they let my ass out. The doctor told me that I was a lucky man. 7 out of 10 people die in the same situation. He credited my survival with the fact that I didn't smoke, was relatively young, and was lucky. This all happened to me on July 27, 2002. I broke at most, if not all, of my ribs in multiple spots, punctured a lung, and bruised both my lungs. I thought for sure that I was going to die that day. When I was in that ditch, I thought I had died. I didn't see God on that day, and I can't tell you I even saw a light. I can tell you it has made me a different person. It's made my marriage better than it ever was and makes me cherish the time I have with the ones I love. Life is too short to be pissed off and mad at the world. Story 6. When I was a sophomore in high school, a friend would drive me home. One day we went to a record store with 2 other friends, and on the way back to drop me off, this guy in a truck passed us like an asshole, narrowly missing our car in oncoming traffic. We decided it'd be fun to follow him for a bit, so he turns onto another road shortly after and immediately pulls up to a mailbox and starts retrieving his mail. As we pass him, all 4 of us flip him off out the window and continue driving down the road. About a half mile later, we see the same vehicle driving insanely fast behind us. He tailgates us for a bit while we start to panic a little. We start to slow down for a stop sign, and the guy whips around us and cuts us off, slamming on his brakes in front of us. We wait for just a moment, and he steps out of his car with a crowbar. We drive around him, but there's a stop sign in front of us, so we had to pause briefly. The guy runs towards my door, the rear passenger door, and grabs for it when my friend takes off. We're flying down this road, hoping to lose him. We make another turn onto a really busy street, and we think we've lost him. We turn again and drive normally for a few miles, and at this point, we're convinced we're safe. We pull up to another intersection and are waiting in the right turn lane when we look behind us, and 2 or 3 cars behind us is the same dude in the turning lane, flashing his headlights on and off. We make our turn and speed down the road, but so does the other guy. He speeds around us and slams on his brakes again, forcing us to stop. We try to go around him, but he keeps maneuvering, so we can't get around. Eventually we stop and I say something stupid like, maybe he just wants to talk to us. So he's straddling both lanes of the road and gets out of his car with his crowbar in hand and a terrifying look on his face. My friend drives off the road, gets around the dude, and we speed away. He of course does the same and is driving like a fucking maniac. But so are we, so we maintain a bit of a lead on him. We make another turn and there's a school bus in front of us, just about to stop. We speed around it just in time for the bus stop sign to extend, and for some reason the dude actually stops behind the bus and we speed off. We were close to another friend's house, so we pulled into their driveway in the open garage. We're all terrified at this point, so we run inside and watch out the window for this asshole. He did drive past the house, but thank God we were parked in the garage, so he didn't see the car. Story 7. I used to work as a security guard. One night I got a real technical post at a local rail yard. I don't want to give away which state I'm in, but I can just say it was fairly large and next to a large city. It was my first night, and this old-timer was showing me the ropes. There's a lot to do. I have to watch a gate as truckers go in and out with brand new cars loaded up on their trailers. I had to do a patrol through a large gated outdoor area that enclosed 5 sets of tracks that unloaded these new cars. It was a 12-hour night shift, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. Thankfully, I wasn't alone or I would have been seriously disturbed. There were drivers and rail workers putting trains together. I forget exactly what time, but in the early AM I get a call from one of them in the security gate office. I'm told that someone, probably a bum, had strolled into the gated area. Now, this area is the size of several football fields, filled with brand new cars with gas in the tank. This is a serious problem and the whole reason I was there in the first place, to protect the probably tens of millions of dollars worth of cars. As I show up in a little golf cart, I speak with one of the rail workers who gave me a very vague description. A man wearing blue jeans. I was then tasked with finding the man in this huge place with about 80 million places to hide. It was clear he was probably a bum and that the cars would offer a wonderful place to sleep for the night. So there I was, going through a huge field of cars. I shined my flashlight into the tinted windows of at least 100 cars. I was expecting to walk up on a bum, sleeping in a car, or listening to the radio. Or worse yet, maybe someone there to steal a car. They all had keys in the ignition and gas in the tank for moving. I looked for almost an hour and nothing. At last, I went to the actual trains. They are huge, like the size of houses. Each one was easily taller than my house and half as wide. You don't realize how big trains are until you get there. I found myself shouting at the trains and walking around them looking for that same bum. I was thorough, but I found nothing at all. Scared, miffed, and while having pissed off truckers honk their horns at me hundreds of meters away, I went back to the guard cabin. I had an argument with a trucker who was pissed at me for keeping him at the gate, and then a phone call from the railway guys asking if I had found the guy. I told them I looked for a long while and couldn't find him. I supposed he may have jumped a fence to get away from me. I had looked everywhere. Another hour passes, and at 3 or 4 a.m., I forgot exactly, I get a call. They found the man on the rail tracks, right where I had been looking. I later learned that he was probably hiding on the tracks, where I wasn't likely to stick my head. Then when I said I couldn't find him, the rail workers moved the train again. He was found in parts. The largest piece was a hand.